My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Make this new school year an opportunity for your kids to learn important life skills with Greenlight. Greenlight is a debit card and money app for families where kids learn how to save, invest, and spend wisely, while parents keep an eye on kids' money habits. Greenlight also helps families get into their fall routine with a chores feature that lets parents assign chores and pay kids allowance when they check them off. Get your first month free at greenlight.com/Spotify. Greenlight.com/Spotify.
This episode is brought to you by Experian. Are you paying for subscriptions you don't use, but can't find the time or energy to cancel them? Experian could cancel unwanted subscriptions for you, saving you an average of $270 per year and plenty of time. Download the Experian app. Results will vary. Not all subscriptions are eligible. Savings are not guaranteed. Paid membership with connected payment account required.
Hey everyone, welcome to this edition of Keep Watch Pass on the It's Not That Bad podcast channel, a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network. When I say the aliens are coming, please do not run. Okay, this isn't like a radio version of the War of the Worlds. We're not trying to scare everyone here. We're just talking about movies about aliens. And here to join me, Carson Elcome is on the show. Carson, welcome. How you doing, man?
I am so good. I'm ready to dive in to the extraterrestrial.
So when we were talking about what we were going to talk about today, you mentioned alien films, and my first thought was, whoa. Alien the franchise or just movies about aliens? Because I will be the first to admit that I think I've maybe watched 2, 3 maximum alien films, but no, we're talking about movies about aliens. So when you were looking through all the movies that have been made, what was some of the criteria that you were looking for?
I think the alien genre, quote unquote, is one of the staples of cinematic history. And for me, when I'm looking at an alien movie, personally speaking, not only do I want a heavier sci-fi vibe, because I find it just fits naturally better into the theme of the movie, but I also want a little bit of horror in there as well. And I think that finds a perfect little in-between there of what a true alien film should be. And not to say some of the lighthearted ones aren't good, just in my personal bravado, I want the tech, I want the insanity, and I want the fear.
See, I kind of went similar to, but not quite. So I took the horror part out of it. I'm not saying I steered away from horror. I just kind of took the horror part out. I limited myself to movies based on Earth, because you could sit there and say, oh yeah, well, it's a Star Trek film and every other character on there is an alien, so it's got to be a movie about aliens. So I tried to take, step away from, the easy pickings, the ones that were very obvious. And I personally stayed away from all the alien films because I'm like, I don't want to be Captain Obvious. But aliens had to in some way be the central focus of the film. It can't have been, oh, here's a bunch of people that are going through things. And by the way, one of them is an alien, but we don't know about it till the end. No, there had to be a central theme to the film. So that kind of did limit some things. And I wanted it to be clearly an alien, not just, well, that character's a little weird. So that was where my head was at. But giving yourself some of these restrictions, did you find it hard to find films that match the keep, watch, and pass criteria?
I had a really hard time specifically finding just a straight up pass that I thought fit, because like I said, it's such a staple of the film industry and cinema in general, all the way back to really the incarnation of cinema. But there was a few that I took a long look at and was like, you know what, it just doesn't feel right for what I want to say, if that makes sense.
It does. I mean, it's hard sometimes because It's Not That Bad, we do our best, our absolute best to find good things to say about the films. Sometimes those movie, makes it hard. Looking at you, Dennis Hopper and The Crow, Wicked Prayer. Still not over that one. But saying a movie is a pass can be harsh. So just know that, and I'll tell you right now, my pass film, I own a copy of it. And it's not a hard pass. Like, I didn't hate it, but I would not actively choose to watch it again. But here's what we're going to do, dear listeners. We are about to go through films about aliens and pick 3 each. A keep, a watch, and a pass. The keep is the one where E.T. can come home and stay home. The watch is the one that, the alien comes by and visits, we're good. And the pass is one that, get off my rock. This is my planet. And Carson, since you brought this topic, you get to start. What is your keep movie about aliens?
It's really basic, and I know it is, but I went with the title of this episode, Alien 1979 is my keep. Not only is it, in my opinion, one of the greatest films ever put on the silver screen, but it really encapsulated the 70s horror genre, as well as adapting on it to something that had never been seen before. That movie is what I like to call the epitome of media-based claustrophobia. You're with those characters through the entire journey. You start off the movie, and right off the bat, you don't even know who the main character is. Is it Dallas? Is it Kane? Is it Ripley? You have no idea because it's so ambiguous. And it's your job as the viewer to follow these characters and understand not which one's the smartest, but maybe which one's the most tactile and what's really going on here. When you break down the Alien movie, there's actually only about 4+ minutes of screen time with the xenomorph. Yet it is known as one of the cult horror classics. Ridley Scott did miracles on me, is how I'll summarize that.
I mean, to say that H.R. Geiger created one of the most iconic images of horror film, that's not even, I think, sugarcoating that. There's no hyperbole there. The xenomorph is one of the coolest creatures in cinema history ever. I say creatures, right? Obviously, a character like Freddy Krueger or a character like Jason Voorhees, they're iconic looking in their own right, but they're not creatures. When it comes to creatures, maybe the Rancor from Return of the Jedi you could put up there, but the xenomorph is kind of in a category all its own because it was horrifying. It was really freaking drooly, and you were scared the minute you saw it. And the fact that you mentioned that it had such little screen time, that kind of gave credence to the idea of you don't need to see the baddie to be scared. Cloverfield perfected it, but Alien started it for sure.
And as a film itself, it kind of flips the genre on its head. You're so used, especially in the 70s, through comics and through other loose media about aliens, you're used to these tall, skinny little creatures with big eyes. And it takes it into not only a completely different direction, but of the perfect species. And it just works brilliantly. And I'm a big proponent to this day of, if you can do it practical, you do the damn thing practical. And Alien Romulus, that just released, does that brilliantly because it takes you right back to this film in the 70s of feeling like you're actually there. And some other movies I thought about that were more CGI driven, not that they're remotely even bad. Some of them are great, great films, but it never makes me feel the way I do, no matter how many times I rewatch it, the feeling of being in the Nostromo with those group of characters and almost feeling like a part of it throughout the movie.
Yeah, you think about some of the recent attempts at adding to the Alien franchise, and to some successful degree, but not without its detractors as well. If Alien Romulus can bring you back to that vibe, A, clearly they understood the assignment, but B, that may make Kaylee Spenny the actress of 2024, considering that and Civil War.
I'm going to say it right now, and I don't care what flack I get for this. Alien Romulus, if you haven't seen it yet, get your ass in that theater. Go see it in IMAX, because it is so far the best movie of 2024.
Hey folks, this is Martin Popoff.
And John Gaffney from Kicked in the Teeth, an AC/DC podcast, part of the Pantheon Podcast Network.
Every month, we take a deep dive into an AC/DC album, giving you some history and trivia, along with a track-by-track discussion.
We also have episodes where we do rankings, lists, tackle all kinds of fun AC/DC-related topics.
So tune in every month to get your fill of AC/DC and more.
At Kicked in the Teeth, an AC/DC podcast.
All right. For my keep pick, I'm going across the pond to a little film called Attack the Block. This is a very, very cool film. It's a low budget, high reward type film. So let me explain here. So you have these aliens that kind of crash into like this small little residential block in like a small UK town that, it's a little run down and whatnot. You have early pre-superstardom roles for John Boyega, who then would go on to be Finn in the Star Wars series, and Jodie Whittaker, who would go on to be in Broadchurch, and frickin' Doctor Who, because Jodie Whittaker was awesome. But it's fun, it's funny, but it's still scary. And these creatures in Attack the Block are some of the coolest aliens on screen in their minimalist way. Like, they're basically big black hairy void blobs with bright blue neon dripping teeth, and they are scary looking as hell. Like, it's stylistic and it looks like nothing else I had seen in any other film. And the fact that it feels like if Guy Ritchie made a horror film with aliens, that's kind of what Attack the Block kind of feels like. And the thing is, it's not just aliens come to Earth and like people from this little block rise up and defeat them. No, it actually plays a little bit on class, on race issues, all in one housing complex. It's a very compact story, but sometimes that is the best way to tell the story without getting too big and too cumbersome in your plot.
Absolutely. And when I've seen the movie only once, and it's got to be about 3 or 4 years ago. Because like what came out in, I want to say 2011, 2012? I want to say early 2010s. But it actually, I don't know if you've ever played, this is a weird comparison, but The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, or if you've seen anything on it.
How do you get from 2011's Attack the Block to The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess?
I know.
I'm just going to sit back, have some popcorn, and watch you connect the dots.
So in the game, there's these Twilight monsters that have a very, very similar vibe. And like on your computer right now, go look up Twilight Monster Legend of Zelda. And they're a little different, but they give me the same kind of vibe where they're just so unique that the fear is similar to how the Xenomorph was in the 70s, that you just have never inherently seen it before. So not that it has to be exceptionally scary or gory or whatever you want to kind of define it as, but it's unique enough and enough of a threat that it just fits perfectly into the vibe of the film.
I mean, I could see where you're going with it a little bit. I take a look at the shadow base and it's like, okay, maybe a little Slender Man-esque in there, but anytime you have a cool villain or a cool creature and the creature look is so unique. Like, there are films out there where it's like, okay, so it's Kirkland brand Xenomorph. Okay, so it's Kirkland brand this. I don't think I've seen anything as, monochromatically or basically non-chromatically scary as hell as these and have it work.
You could argue that it did for the modern era what the Xenomorph did. Like I said, it's just so unique and different that it almost goes into not a genre of its own, but a realm of its own because it just hasn't been seen before.
Yeah. And that's like, make something unique and have it work in a story. And I mean, the fact that we cannot talk about that film on It's Not That Bad. 91% tomatometer. When you pull it off, like when you're firing on all cylinders, it's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. For my watch film, though, I'm going the exact opposite direction with this. I'm going for a cute little film from 1987 called Batteries Not Included. So let me try and paint a picture for you here in their little 80s happy family film type thing. So you have this one building that is kind of earmarked for demolition. So this evil, land development organization can build up condos, very New York. But they're fighting eviction. They're fighting, being kicked out and having their homes taken from them. And there's these different people and couples in the building, and they're really trying to kind of hold on their own. Like there's a little restaurant in the building that's run by Hume Crone and Jessica Tandy, which this is a fantastic performance from Jessica Tandy. She is fantastic in this. Hume Crone, their relationship in this film is so heartwarming and heartbreaking at the same time. But then all of a sudden, these little spaceship looking aliens show up, and they're basically like, the best way I can describe it is they are like little space elves who fix things in the middle of the night. So, a plate breaks, and then when everyone's sleeping, they go and they fix it. The jukebox is broken. When no one's looking, they'll go and fix it. Like, this is what they do. And these aliens, in their penchant for fixing things, because this is what they do, they're making everyone in the building's lives better. All the while, this company is still trying to get them out of the damn building so they can tear it down and build up a shopping center or whatever the case it was. Elizabeth Pena is in it. And it's a good film because Brad Bird, this is the first film he wrote and then went on to do The Iron Giant and The Incredibles. Like, it's a gem. There's no better way to put it. This is a family-friendly gem of a film, but it's not like cutesy aliens. Yeah, little spaceship aliens are cute. I'm not going to take that away from them, but it's not like you had like a little goofy alien. It's a movie more about people at different points in their lives who sometimes just need a little bit of help and a little bit of luck, and maybe things turn out a little bit better. And Batteries Not Included has a ton of heart in that film.
It's just wholesome. And I haven't seen it, but I know of it. And I know people that absolutely adore this film, my uncle included. And I understand why just as an outsider. Because whenever I hear someone speak about it, it's always not about inherently the beauty of it, but just how close to the heart it resonates for a lot of people. An alien movie doesn't have to be scary. We know that. We've seen the ETs, but that's a bad example because the ET scared the shit out of me as a child. But nowadays, it's not inherently scary, but it's a really nice story that brings in a sci-fi element that we haven't seen, but haven't extrapolated enough on.
Yeah, it's almost like a Christmas film without it being a Christmas film, because you have that elf aspect to it. But the relationship between Hume Cronin and Jessica Tandy, at one point you're like, oh, they're such a sweet little couple, and on the other side they're like, yeah, but they're both dealing with a lot of trauma that neither of them have taken the time to process because they're doing what they can just to get by. Like, 80s films basically said, F your feelings, we're going to mess with you. and make films that, because of the complexity of the stories, last longer. They didn't mind, giving you a cute little film that will also make you grab the box of Kleenex. The 80s didn't shy away from being able to be more than one thing. And I think that films today or if they're able to walk down different roads at the same time, might have a little, some of that lasting power that the films from the 80s did. Despite the fact that, yes, you're right, E.T. is part of the nightmare fuel of the 80s starter pack, but batteries not included. It's not nightmare fuel, but it definitely makes you check yourself a little bit.
I can 100% get behind you on that. You can always chunk cinema into its eras. The 70s were really, really gritty. The 80s tended to be a lot more lighthearted, a lot of hero storylines. And the 90s, in a lot of ways, kind of meshed those two together. But then we get gems like this, what really bring you back to not only a eccentric kind of 80s joy feeling and not nostalgia, but just that warm feeling, but also gives you a plot that resonates with a massive chunk of the world.
Yeah. 70s gritty, 80s messed with you, 90s basically philosophized, and then the 2000s happened. And there we go from there.
That's what you call a tough look for the brand.
Yeah. All right, Carson, your watch film of movies about aliens.
So I'm going to start off by saying which movie that came to mind at first, but then I realized about 5 seconds later was not remotely an alien film. And that was David Cronenberg's The Fly. Because in my head before going into this, I'm just thinking of these movies and I'm like, oh, The Fly. And I'm like, that's not even an alien movie. But piggybacking off of that to a film that we recently spoke of, its prequel. Am I allowed to say that? Will that be out at the point of...
You know what? Even if it's not out, we're just going to tease it. So if it's out, then you know what we're talking about. And if it's not out, dun, dun, dun.
No, you can't do da da da. You gotta go bum 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 because it's The Thing. 1982 is my watch, and I'm not gonna lie, it was a pretty big toss up between Alien as my watch and The Thing as my keep, and vice versa. I went this route because I think Alien was just a little more grounded for what I wanted in an Alien specific movie, but The Thing to me is just not quite perfection, but a real staple of the time frame. The 80s brought so many issues for a lot of people. There was the stock market crash. A lot of people were losing homes, losing money. They didn't know who to trust. And that's a really big reflection on this movie. And I think that's one of the reasons why it didn't really become a cult classic until later down the road, because it was such a heavy thematic film at the time. Not to mention, the same year you had to go up against E.T., which really showed what people wanted. They wanted to go to the film with their family and see a lighthearted movie. They didn't want to go to the cinema, go to the theater, and see a disgusting, darkened take in a smaller scale society. And Kurt Russell as R.J. McCready in this movie symbolizes the 80s to me. The semi-macho yet kind of loner character off to the side that does his job. He does his job well, but he's just views himself as not maybe a leader, but just on top of the situation. And I think that's why a lot of people now grapple towards The Thing as a cult classic, because there's been a lot of things over the last few years, last decade, that hasn't allowed people to have control or trust. I mean, look at COVID as a big example of that. And it really, to me, symbolizes the true horror of what an alien film can be. It's not E.T. coming down and making a friend. It's not other films, even similar to Batteries Not Included, where you're going to be, hey, there's this big problem, but we're going to overcome it. No. This is the problem, and we're all going down with the ship. The last scene of The Thing, in my opinion, is one of the greatest ends to a movie in cinema. When R.J. McCready and Childs are just sitting there, everything's torched up behind them. The world, in their view, is gone because they know they're about to die. And it ends with the last line being, I don't know. Let's just sit a while. And I think that's where a lot of people sat during the 80s, especially the early 80s.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you were to ask someone, what was fantasy, sci-fi, horror in 1982, and there will be some who will say The Thing right away, and they wouldn't be wrong. But I mean, I want to give you a list of films that also came out in that year that may have overshadowed it a little bit. I mean, The Dark Crystal, for one, Blade Runner, E.T., Conan the Barbarian. You've got Tron, right? Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, arguably the best Star Trek film that ever Star Trekked, period. Like, there were some good films out in 1982. The Thing is one of those ones that's going to maybe fly under the radar a little bit. And need
but
a
with
little bit.
all the films you mentioned, sorry to cut you off, what's the main ending of each of those films? Either the hero not only, I'll say, wins, but they tend to come out on top. There's a satisfying, there's a happy, you're leaving that theater with a relatively good vibe. As opposed to The Thing, when I'm sure a lot of people in the 80s, especially with the level of body horror that they experienced for a lot of people the first time, were like, what the heck did I just watch? Like, I'm uncomfortable. I'm distraught. And I think it's just such a duality of the times.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that between Creepshow, Poltergeist, and The Thing, at least from a horror movie perspective, like those are probably your best 3 horror films of the year, and everything else kind of falls in line afterwards. But the thing with some horror films, like, unless it hits off of some pop culture zeitgeist moment, it's usually one of those ones, and especially in the 80s, where you kind of have to wait for it to end up at the video store so you can rent it and then watch it over and over and over again. It's not like, now where it's out and then like in 2 months it's on streaming and you can go ahead and watch it. So a movie like The Thing is going to have that kind of longevity because, it takes time to gestate into the pop culture mindset. And the ones that did well will continue to be talked about, and The Thing is definitely one of them. Absolutely. But then we get to your pass pick. And I know you were saying at the beginning of the show that this is maybe a little bit of a tougher one for you, but I'm curious now which movie you went with.
So this is going to be a little divisive, and I'm okay with that. This is the most modern movie out of the 3 I picked, and it came out in 2021. And I was thinking about what I said before in the alien genre of maybe a little bit of horror, that suspense, but overall you want that, maybe not violence, but that what's going to happen next. And for me, not only was this movie, in my eyes, a major disappointment, but just a mess of a film. And that, to what I assume may be your surprise, is Venom, Let There Be Carnage.
Yeah, so I have thoughts. Now, I will defend the first Venom film. Because, I mean, like, Venom is not an easy character to kind of pull off. And I think they did actually a decent enough job. Way better than Spider-Man 3 did. Not my Brock.
And just to preface, too, and I can agree with you, Topher Grace was probably not the play for that one, but I enjoyed the first Venom movie. I thought it was nice to see Venom get his own movie. I thought Tom Hardy was a great casting role. I think for me, there was a bit of times where I'm like, okay, we're in the Marvel stage of where you can't really take anything seriously because they're always just going to come out on top and also just quip every other word. But I enjoyed it. And I was really, really excited to see Carnage get his Marvel debut and to see Woody Harrelson portray that. Because I remember seeing that first teaser trailer of Woody Harrelson sitting in that cell and being like, oh, that's a brilliant casting choice. I can't wait to see how this goes down. But then I watched the movie. And not only is it a convoluted mess of CGI and poor plotting, but it's just not an entertaining movie. It follows a lot of the stereotypical alien genre. Something comes from space. People mess it up because scientists are dumb in some of these movies. And all of a sudden it falls into the hands of the unlikeliest person. And that's not to say you can't base something off that premise, but it just falls flat in nearly every way besides Woody Harrelson and Tom Hardy being on screen as themselves.
Yeah. And I think the problem is that Woody Harrelson saw comic book film and went full comic book. And that's not what this film needed. Carnage is Cletus Cassidy is an absolute psychopath.
Demented, like horrendous in the comics.
Yeah. We needed more Mickey and Mallory rather than whatever the hell he brought to the screen.
It feels like this film is something that could have benefited from an R rating.
Yes.
And it's just tough to me because I understand why you obviously and why production companies and studios don't do this, because it hampers a lot of your audience, and I can appreciate that. But when you have a character as dark as Carnage, as Cletus Cassidy, you have to do that justice, or it just comes off as what you said previously, a generic brand. Like it's very much just left me wanting. I came out of the theater, I saw it with my aunt back in 2021 on release weekend, and I just remember leaving with her being like, that was a movie we watched, and I won't remember it in 30 seconds because it was so forgettable.
Yeah. You needed to do less of what Woody Harrelson did on screen as Cletus Cassidy, and you needed to pull a performance kind of like what Jackie Earle Haley did in Watchmen as Rorschach. Give me more of that. Give me more of that on the edge. Like, you're not sure if he's going to snap on you or not.
Yeah, and that was a big issue. Like, not that Marvel movies have fallen off. I mean, you can kind of make that argument depending on how you view it. But there's never suspense in a Marvel movie anymore, is how I feel. And maybe you feel differently depending on how much you go to the theater, what you watch, and that's okay. But it felt very much like a cookie cutter sequel that was there to capitalize on the popularity of the film that came out 2 years prior.
Yeah, I mean, they landed well with the first Venom. And then this one, not as good as the first one. But then it goes downhill from there with Morbius and Madam Web. And I'm hopeful that Kraven the Hunter kind of brings them back up. But I'm going to sit and hold my breath and wait, because Sony hasn't exactly had the best track record with live action Spider-Verse films, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. For my past film, I'm digging deep here, and my Canadian's going to show, so bear with me. My past is a movie called Phil the Alien, with the biggest name in it being Nicole DeBoer, who of course played Ezri Dax on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And I like her. I think she's good. I don't think she gets the roles that she deserves, but I'm going to write down what I wrote about this film, which was preceded by there's a lot of what the f*** in this film. This movie is about an alien with telekinetic powers who has people thinking he's the Messiah, and he joins a rock band, and also he's friends with the talking beaver, and there's also dolphins involved. I don't even know where to begin with this. This was written, starring, and first time directed by Rob Stefaniak. And I don't like pooping on films, especially Canadian ones, like low budget Canadian films. And this is a very Canadian film. But they were trying to be quirky, and they were trying to be a little out there. And it doesn't really quite work. And if you're Canadian, then you'll probably like it, because you got Graham Greene in it. You've got Sean Cullen, who was in the comedy group Corky and the Juice Pigs. You got Nicole DeBoer in it, and there are worse films out there. I'll give you that. But it's not great. It could be much better. And the thing is, I own a copy of this film, so I'm not quite sure what's right or what's wrong with me. But I mean, still, that's the thing. I wish it was funnier, but it was just, it was funny-ish in its absurdity. By the way, the voice of the beaver is Joe Flaherty. So there's all your Canadian that you need right there. I just wish it was more than what it was, and a little bit more structured and a little less kooky, because the premise is there, but it just kind of went off the rails a bit.
And I remember watching Rob Stefanik stand-up specials with my dad growing up, and like, he's a funny guy, and obviously, like, to an extent, he's kind of like a small Canadian icon. So like, as a proud Canadian, you obviously want that success. And I mean, it was also filmed in Paris, Ontario, which is 30 minutes away from where I lived. It's a gorgeous town. And even then, I'm like, you should have done Paris, Ontario better.
Right. By the way, to those who don't know the area, Paris, Ontario is right next door to London, Ontario. Yeah, we know what we're doing here in Canada. We can read a map. All right, Carson, remind our listeners what your keep, watch, and pass films are when it comes to movies about aliens.
My keep was the 1979 Ridley Scott film Alien. My watch was The Thing, 1982 by John Carpenter. And my pass was Venom, Let There Be Carnage, 2021 by, I don't even know who directed it, because I don't want to know, because it was that disappointing.
All right, my keep film is Attack the Block. My watch is 1987's Batteries Not Included. And my pass is Phil the Alien. Carson, thank you so much for this. Please remind our listeners where they can find you out there on the interwebs.
You can find me at Carson Elc12, ELC12 on Twitter and X.
All right, thanks so much. And to you, our listeners, you guys know the drill. If there is a topic that you want us to cover on Keep, Watch, Pass, or a movie that you want us to cover on It's Not That Bad, hit us up on social media at Not That Badcast, or go to our website at notthatbadcast.com, and be sure to drop us a line while you're there and check out all of our other shows. Until next time, he's Carson. I'm Jay. You guys are awesome. This is Keep, Watch, Pass on the It's Not That Bad podcast channel, a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network. Take care.
The Arwen Lewis Show is brought to you by Evolve Entertainment, featured on Pantheon Podcasts. And I'm Arwen. I inhabit our blue planet, but my beliefs belong in the celestial realm. I'm the daughter of Peter Lewis, founding member of rock and roll cult icons Moby Grape, and the granddaughter of Oscar-winning actress Loretta Young, and I've been part of the creative cosmos all my life. I'm a recording artist, musician, songwriter, and producer, and I am your host for The Arwen Lewis Show. The Arwen Lewis Show features in-depth interviews with the hottest indie music artists and music royalty. Listen to me on any of your favorite digital listening platforms, particularly from my channel on Pantheon Podcasts and thearwenlewisshow.com.
Hi, this is Peter Lewis and Moby Grape. You're listening to The Arwen Lewis Show.